Marcus Chen adjusted his worn backpack straps as he walked through the pristine corridors of New Geneva Galactic Academy. The marble floors reflected the soft blue glow of holographic displays, showing the latest news from across the galaxy. Students from dozens of alien species chatted in small groups, their translator implants seamlessly converting their native languages into standard galactic common. Nobody noticed the 17-year-old human shuffle past. Not the towering Zorathi with their crystalline skin that refracted light into rainbow patterns. Not the floating ethereals whose gaseous forms shimmered with bioluminescent thoughts. Not even the insectoid Krillians who usually noticed everything with their compound eyes. Marcus had perfected the art of being invisible in plain sight. He slipped into advanced xenobiology, taking his usual seat in the back corner. Professor Vexani, a respected ethereal scholar whose form glowed a soft purple when teaching, began the lesson on combat applications of biological warfare. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus as he pretended to take notes while actually sketching mechanical designs in his notebook margins. The human immune system, Professor Vexani's translated voice echoed through the classroom. While primitive compared to more evolved species, shows remarkable adaptability. However, their physical limitations make them unsuitable for modern warfare. Several alien students chuckled. Marcus kept his head down, adding another modification to his sketched weapon design. If only they knew that the primitive human sitting behind them had single-handedly destroyed 3 Dominion dreadnoughts just 6 months ago. The Galactic War had been raging for 2 years now. The Hegemony Dominion, a coalition of militaristic species led by the brutal Vorthak Empire, sought to enslave or eliminate what they considered lesser races. Earth had been one of the first targets, expected to fall within days. Instead, humanity had shocked the galaxy with their fierce resistance and unconventional tactics. Marcus remembered the day his parents died in the orbital bombardment of New Sydney. He'd been visiting his grandmother in the countryside when the sky burned. By the time he reached the city, nothing remained but radioactive glass. That night, he'd walked into a military recruitment center and lied about his age. The Terran Defense Force had been desperate enough not to ask too many questions. They needed soldiers, and Marcus Chen was exceptionally good at killing the galaxy's monsters. His first deployment had been the Kepler 442 mining colonies. The Dominion had sent Vorthak shock troopers to massacre the civilian population. Marcus had arrived with the relief force to find streets littered with bodies. The Vorthak were 7-foot-tall reptilian nightmares with natural armor plating and razor-sharp claws. Military doctrine suggested engaging them at long range with heavy weapons. Marcus had other ideas. While his unit provided covering fire, he'd slipped into the colony's maintenance tunnels. Using his smaller human frame to navigate spaces the massive Vorthak couldn't follow, he'd emerged behind their lines with nothing but explosive charges and a combat knife. The Vorthak had never encountered an enemy that used the environment itself as a weapon. Within hours, their impregnable position had collapsed into chaos. Word of the young human's tactics spread through both armies. The Dominion began calling him Ghostwalker, after he infiltrated and destroyed a command bunker thought to be unreachable. His own people knew him simply as the Kid, too young to drink, too deadly to ignore. The classroom chime snapped Marcus back to the present. Students were filing out, their alien conversations a buzz of different frequencies and tones. Marcus gathered his things slowly, waiting for the room to empty before approaching Professor Vexani. "Professor, I was wondering about the section on adaptive immunity," he said, keeping his voice neutral and academic. "Are there any documented cases of rapid mutation in response to biological weapons?" The ethereal's form shifted to a pleased amber color. Mr. Chen, an excellent question. The Terran immune system has shown some fascinating responses during the current conflict. There are reports of human soldiers developing resistance to Dominion bioweapons within hours of exposure. Quite remarkable for such a young species. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Any theories on the mechanism? Several. Some xenobiologists believe it's related to humanity's unusual evolutionary pressure. Your species evolved on a death world, constantly fighting disease, predators, and environmental hazards. This may have created unusual genetic flexibility. Death world. That's what the galaxy called Earth. A planet so hostile that sentient life shouldn't have been possible. High gravity, extreme weather, deadly microorganisms, and aggressive megafauna. Most species couldn't survive on Earth's surface without environmental suits. Humans called it home. Thank you, Professor. That's very helpful for my research project, Marcus said, already planning how this information might prove useful in the field. As he left the classroom, Marcus's personal communicator vibrated with an encrypted message. His handler, Major Sarah Rodriguez, needed him for a briefing. The Dominion was planning something big near the Proxima Centauri system, and intelligence suggested they were developing new bioweapons specifically designed to target human physiology. Marcus sighed and checked his class schedule. He had galactic history next, then advanced mathematics followed by cultural exchange period. If he left now, he could catch a transport to the Luna Command Center, receive his briefing, deploy to whatever hellscape needed his attention, save a few thousand lives, and still make it back for tomorrow's physics exam. Being a teenage super soldier was exhausting, but someone had to do it. The galaxy was counting on humanity's primitive adaptability to keep the monsters at bay. Marcus Chen would make sure they weren't disappointed, even if it meant staying invisible in the halls of school while being unstoppable on the battlefield. After all, nobody expected the quiet kid in the back row to be the most dangerous human alive. The Luna Command Center buzzed with controlled chaos as Marcus stepped off the transport shuttle. Officers from a dozen species worked alongside human personnel, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and translated voices. The war room's main display showed the Proxima system in real time, red markers indicating Dominion fleet positions. Major Rodriguez spotted him immediately, her augmented eye implants recognizing his biometric signature before he'd taken 3 steps into the facility. She was one of the few people who knew Marcus's true identity. To most of the military, he was simply Operative Whisper, a classified asset whose existence was barely acknowledged in official records. "Chen, we've got a situation," she said, leading him toward a secured briefing room. "The Dominion isn't just developing bioweapons. They're preparing to test them on the Centauri colonies." Marcus followed her into the room where a holographic display showed detailed scans of a massive Dominion research vessel. The ship was unlike anything he'd seen before. Organic curves blended with metallic surfaces suggesting a fusion of Vorthak engineering and something else entirely. "What am I looking at?" Marcus asked, studying the ship's unusual design. "Meet the Plague Bearer," Rodriguez replied grimly. "Intelligence suggests it's carrying experimental pathogens designed specifically to target human DNA. The Dominion has been studying our genetic markers from battlefield casualties. They think they've found our weakness." A second officer entered the room, Commander Thexel, a Krillian whose insectoid features made his expressions difficult to read. His translator rendered his chittering speech into precise, clipped sentences. "The vessel departed Vorthak space 12 hours ago. Current trajectory suggests they intend to test their weapons on Proxima Centauri B's agricultural colonies. Population, 2 million humans and allied species." Marcus felt the familiar cold settling into his chest. It was the same feeling he'd experienced watching New Sydney burn, the same emptiness that filled him before every mission. Emotions were a luxury he couldn't afford when lives hung in the balance. "What's the plan?" he asked simply. Rodriguez activated another display showing the Plague Bearer's internal layout. "Conventional assault is impossible. The ship's surrounded by 3 destroyer escorts and has adaptive shields that can repel most attacks. However, it has one vulnerability." She highlighted a section of the ship's organic hull. "The bioresearch labs are integrated into the vessel's living systems. To maintain sterile conditions, they have independent life support that cycles through external vents. The vents are too small for most species to navigate, but not too small for a human," Marcus finished. "Specifically, not too small for a human teenager who spent years crawling through maintenance shafts and ventilation systems," Commander Thexel added. "You would need to infiltrate the ship, access their research data, and neutralize the bioweapons before they can be deployed." Marcus studied the schematics, his mind already mapping potential routes and escape plans. The mission was suicide by any reasonable standard. The Plague Bearer would be heavily guarded, filled with Dominion soldiers who shoot first and never bothered asking questions. Even if he successfully infiltrated the vessel, destroying the bioweapons might release the very pathogens he was trying to contain. "There's another complication," Rodriguez continued. "Our intelligence suggests the Dominion has a new ally, the Umbral Collective. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The Umbral Collective was a mysterious faction that had appeared during the early days of the war. Unlike other species, they seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, appearing and disappearing without warning. Most military analysts believed they were extinct ancient beings who had been awakened by the galactic conflict. "What do the Umbrals want with bioweapons?" Marcus asked. "Unknown, but their technology could make the Dominion's pathogens exponentially more dangerous. We're not just talking about weapons that target humans anymore. They might be developing something that could threaten all organic life in the galaxy." Marcus nodded slowly. The stakes were clear, and the mission parameters were straightforward. Infiltrate an impossibly defended ship, steal classified research data, destroy weapons of mass destruction, and somehow escape alive. Just another Tuesday in his extraordinary ordinary life. "When do I deploy?" 6 hours. That gives you enough time to return to the academy, take your physics exam, and maintain your cover identity. We can't risk exposing Operation Whisper now, not when the Dominion might be close to achieving their goals. The irony struck Marcus as he prepared to leave. In 6 hours, he'd be sitting in Professor Caney's physics class, pretending to struggle with basic quantum mechanics, while his classmates debated theoretical applications. None of them would know that their quiet human classmate was about to attempt one of the most dangerous missions in galactic history. As the transport shuttle carried him back to New Geneva, Marcus reviewed the mission files on his encrypted tablet. The Plague-Bearer's crew consisted of over 3,000 Dominion soldiers, scientists, and support personnel. Security would be tight, and any mistake would result in not just his death but the deaths of millions of innocents in the Centauri colonies. He'd faced worse odds before. During the Battle of Titan's Shadow, he'd infiltrated a Dominion fortress with a garrison of 5,000. The Siege of New Babylon had seen him sabotage an entire enemy fleet from the inside. Each mission had taught him new ways to turn humanity's supposed weaknesses into devastating advantages. The galaxy saw humans as physically inferior, emotionally unstable, and technologically primitive. They were right about the first point. Humans were smaller, slower, and weaker than most spacefaring species. But they consistently underestimated human adaptability, creativity, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Marcus had learned to use those misconceptions as weapons. Enemies expected him to fight like a proper soldier, following established tactics and engaging in honorable combat. Instead, he fought like a human, unpredictably, unconventionally, and with a willingness to use any tool or technique that might provide an advantage. The shuttle docked at the academy just as afternoon classes were ending. Marcus slipped back into his student persona, shoulders hunched and expression carefully neutral. He had homework to complete, study groups to attend, and a physics exam to fail convincingly. Tonight he would save the galaxy. Tomorrow he would be invisible again in the halls of school, just another unremarkable human trying to keep up with his alien classmates. But first, he needed to figure out how to explain why he hadn't completed Professor Zenth's assignment on theoretical warp drive mechanics. Some challenges were harder than others. The stealth insertion pod drifted silently through the debris field surrounding the Plague-Bearer. Marcus had launched from a cloaked frigate 3 hours earlier, his small craft designed to mimic space junk while carrying him toward his target. The Dominion destroyers maintained their protective formation, their sensors sweeping the area for threats large enough to register as hostile. They weren't looking for a 17-year-old human in a coffin-sized pod. Marcus checked his equipment one final time. His combat suit was a marvel of human engineering, lightweight, flexible, and equipped with adaptive camouflage that could mimic almost any surface. The suit's computer contained detailed scans of the Plague-Bearer's layout, updated with real-time intelligence from surveillance drones that had been monitoring the vessel for days. His weapons were minimal by design. A plasma knife for close-quarters work, a handful of micro-explosives, and a modified pistol that fired crystalline rounds designed to disrupt alien nervous systems without triggering biological contamination protocols. Everything he carried could be concealed within his suit's storage compartments. The pod's proximity sensors chimed softly as the Plague-Bearer loomed ahead. The vessel was even more disturbing up close. Sections of its hull pulsed with organic rhythms, while mechanical components sparked with alien energy. It was a fusion of Vorthak bioengineering and something else entirely. something that made Marcus's skin crawl with instinctive revulsion. According to intelligence reports, the ship's living hull could regenerate minor damage and adapt to different environmental conditions. Traditional boarding techniques would be detected immediately as the organic systems registered foreign intrusion. Marcus needed to find a way inside that wouldn't trigger the vessel's biological immune responses. The ventilation ports Rodriguez had identified were located along the ship's underside. Barely visible among the organic growths that covered the hull, Marcus maneuvered his pod closer, using micro-thrusters to match the plague-bearer's velocity and approach vector. One wrong move would send him careening into the ship's defensive screens or alert, the sensor operators monitoring the surrounding space. His pod's exterior began to heat up as it entered. The larger vessel's electromagnetic field, the stealth coating absorbed most of the energy, but Marcus could feel the temperature rising inside his suit. He had maybe 10 minutes before the pod systems would start to fail. The nearest ventilation port was 3 meters away. Marcus activated his suit's magnetic grapples and prepared for the most dangerous part of his infiltration. Once he left the pod, he would be completely exposed in open space with nothing but his suit's limited maneuvering system for protection. He triggered the pod's self-destruct sequence and launched himself toward the ventilation port. The small explosion behind him would register as debris impact, common enough in a war zone to avoid suspicion. Marcus's momentum carried him across the gap between the pod and the ship's hull, his magnetic grapples finding purchase on the organic surface. The hull felt warm under his gloves, pulsing with alien life. Marcus forced himself to ignore the sensation and focused on reaching the ventilation port. The opening was barely wide enough for his shoulders, designed for maintenance drones rather than infiltrating soldiers. Most species would find it impossible to navigate. Humans, however, had evolved as persistence hunters and scavengers. They could squeeze through spaces that would trap larger predators, survive in environments that would kill more specialized species, and adapt to conditions that would overwhelm more advanced civilizations. Marcus's human physiology was about to prove its worth once again. He slipped inside the ventilation system and began crawling through the narrow passages. The ship's internal layout matched the intelligence reports, but the organic components added complications that hadn't appeared in the scans. Sections of the ventilation system pulsed and contracted like blood vessels, requiring careful timing to navigate without getting crushed. The air inside the ship carried alien scents that his suit's filters struggled to process. Ozone and sulfur mixed with something organic and rotten, creating an atmosphere that would be toxic to most species. Marcus's enhanced human immune system allowed him to function even if his filtration systems failed completely. After 20 minutes of careful navigation, Marcus reached the bio-research section. Through a ventilation grate, he could see Dominion scientists working with samples contained in energy fields. The laboratory was a fusion of high technology and biological horror. Computer terminals grew from wall surfaces like technological tumors, while containment units pulsed with their own internal lighting. Marcus activated his suit's recording equipment and began documenting everything he could see. The research data would be invaluable for developing countermeasures, assuming he survived long enough to transmit it back to Terra Command. According to his mission briefing, the laboratory contained samples of 12 different bioweapons, each designed to target specific aspects of human physiology. A movement at the far end of the laboratory caught his attention. Something that definitely wasn't Vorthak or any other Dominion species was examining one of the containment units. The figure appeared to exist partially outside normal space, its form shifting and wavering like heat distortion. Marcus had never seen an umbral collective entity in person, but the descriptions matched intelligence reports perfectly. The umbral seemed to be modifying the bioweapon samples, adding some kind of energy matrix that made the contained pathogens glow with unnatural light. Whatever the ancient beings were doing to the Dominion's weapons, it was making them far more dangerous than originally designed. Marcus needed to get closer to document the modification process, but the ventilation grate was sealed with both mechanical and biological locks. The organic components would detect any attempt at forced entry and alert the ship's security systems. He needed a different approach. His suit's analysis systems identified a maintenance access panel 20 meters away. The panel was designed for automated repair drones, but Marcus thought he could modify it to grant him access to the laboratory's computer systems. If he could hack into the ship's internal network, he might be able to lower the laboratory's security barriers and create a distraction that would allow him to complete his mission. As he crawled toward the access panel, Marcus reflected on the irony of his situation. Tomorrow morning, he was supposed to be in Professor Kane's physics class, pretending to struggle with concepts that were child's play compared to the technology surrounding him. His classmates would never know that their quiet human companion was currently infiltrating one of the most dangerous vessels in the galaxy. The access panel came into view, its biomechanical interface pulsing with the same rhythm as the ship's hull. Marcus began the delicate process of connecting his suit's computer to the alien system, hoping that human adaptability would once again prove superior to superior technology. The galaxy was about to learn why humans were so dangerous, not because they were the strongest or fastest or smartest species, but because they refused to stay down when knocked to the ground. Marcus's fingers worked carefully at the biomechanical interface, his suit's computer systems attempting to establish a connection with the Plague-Bearer's network. The alien technology resisted his intrusion, its organic components detecting the foreign presence and beginning to mount defensive responses. Warning pheromones filled the air around the access panel, but Marcus's sealed environment suit protected him from the ship's biological alarm systems. The interface finally accepted his connection, but not in the way he'd expected. Instead of granting him access to the ship's computer network, the organic components began learning from his suit's systems. The biomechanical technology was adapting to human engineering in real time, incorporating elements of Terran design into its own structure. Marcus realized he was witnessing something unprecedented, the first documented case of Dominion biotechnology successfully interfacing with human systems. The implications were terrifying. If the enemy could reverse engineer human technology, they might be able to develop countermeasures to humanity's adaptive advantages. But the connection worked both ways. As the alien system learned from his equipment, Marcus's suit was downloading vast amounts of data from the ship's network. Technical specifications, research notes, communication logs, and most importantly, the complete genetic profiles the Dominion had compiled on human physiology. The data painted a disturbing picture. The Dominion had been collecting human genetic samples from every battlefield, analyzing the DNA of fallen soldiers to identify potential vulnerabilities. Their bioweapons weren't designed to kill quickly. They were engineered to cause maximum suffering while ensuring the victims remained alive long enough to transmit their agony to any humans attempting rescue operations. Marcus felt a cold rage building in his chest as he read through the research notes. The Dominion scientists described their human test subjects in clinical terms, noting how different torture techniques affected their psychological responses. They had been perfecting methods of breaking human morale by targeting not just physical weaknesses, but emotional and social bonds. A new file caught his attention, something labeled Umbral Enhancement Protocol. The data was partially encrypted, but Marcus could make out enough to understand the basic concept. The Umbral Collective wasn't just helping the Dominion improve their bioweapons. They were teaching them how to weaponize concepts that existed outside normal spacetime. The enhanced pathogens could apparently propagate through quantum entanglement, spreading across vast distances instantaneously. A single infected individual could theoretically contaminate entire star systems without any physical contact. The Dominion was preparing to deploy weapons that would make traditional quarantine procedures completely useless. Marcus's suit chimed softly, indicating that the data download was complete. He'd obtained everything he needed to develop countermeasures, but his mission wasn't finished. The bioweapon samples needed to be destroyed before they could be deployed, and he still needed to escape from one of the most heavily defended ships in the galaxy. He disconnected from the access panel and began crawling toward the laboratory section. The ventilation system's organic components had grown accustomed to his presence, no longer contracting defensively when he moved through the passages. It was another example of humanity's unexpected adaptability. Even alien biotechnology couldn't maintain its hostility toward something that refused to be rejected. The laboratory came into view again, but the scene had changed dramatically. The Umbral entity was gone, replaced by a team of Vorthak scientists who were preparing the enhanced bioweapons for deployment. Massive containment units lined the walls, each one holding enough weaponized pathogens to devastate entire worlds. Marcus counted at least 50 different samples, each one labeled with target species and deployment vectors. The majority were designed for humans, but others targeted the Krillian nervous system, ethereal energy matrices, and even the crystalline biology of the Zorathi. The Dominion wasn't just planning to destroy humanity, they intended to commit genocide against every species that opposed their expansion. A ventilation grate near the laboratory's main computer terminal offered his best opportunity for access. Marcus positioned himself above the opening and began the delicate process of removing the grate without triggering security systems. The organic locks required a combination of chemical and electrical signals to disengage, but his suit's adaptive systems had learned enough from the access panel to provide the necessary codes. The grate opened silently, providing Marcus with a clear view of the laboratory below. 3 Vorthax scientists were working at different stations, their attention focused on their instruments. Security cameras swept the room in regular patterns, but Marcus had memorized their timing during his surveillance. He dropped silently into the laboratory, his suit's camouflage adapting to match the biomechanical walls. The Vorthax scientists continued their work, unaware that humanity's most dangerous operative was standing 3 meters away from them. Marcus activated his suit's micro-explosives, setting timers for strategic placement throughout the laboratory. The charges were designed to create a cascading failure that would destroy the bioweapon samples without releasing their contents into the ship's atmosphere. If everything went according to plan, the explosions would be contained within the laboratory's isolation systems. As he moved between the containment units, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. One of the bioweapon samples wasn't sealed in an energy field like the others. It was contained in a simple glass vial sitting on a laboratory bench, completely unprotected from the surrounding environment. The label read, Human Empathy Virus, Test Sample 001. Marcus realized he was looking at something beyond physical warfare. The Dominion had weaponized the very trait that made humans most dangerous to their empire, the ability to form emotional bonds across species lines. The virus was designed to destroy humanity's capacity for empathy, turning them into isolated, paranoid individuals who couldn't coordinate effective resistance. Without empathy, humans would lose their greatest advantage in galactic warfare. They wouldn't be able to inspire loyalty in alien allies, coordinate complex operations with mixed species teams, or maintain the morale necessary for sustained resistance. The Dominion had found a way to turn humanity's strength into their ultimate weakness. Marcus carefully photographed the virus sample and its accompanying research notes. This information was even more valuable than the genetic data he'd already collected. If Terra Command could develop immunity to the empathy virus, humanity might be able to turn the weapon against its creators. The timer on his first explosive showed 30 seconds remaining. Marcus needed to finish placing his charges and escape before the laboratory's destruction alerted the ship's security forces. But as he prepared to leave, he noticed movement at the laboratory's main entrance. More Vorthax scientists were entering the room, along with something that made Marcus's enhanced human reflexes scream warnings. An umbral collective entity was materializing in the center of the laboratory, its form stabilizing into something resembling a walking shadow with too many angles. Marcus had run out of time. The explosives would detonate in 20 seconds, and he was trapped in a room with some of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. His mission parameters said nothing about fighting umbral entities, but then again, no human had ever survived a direct encounter with one. It was time to find out if human adaptability extended to impossible situations. 15 seconds. Marcus watched the umbral entity solidify into physical reality, its form shifting between dimensions in ways that hurt to perceive directly. The Vorthax scientists backed away from the creature with obvious fear, their reptilian features showing an emotion Marcus had never seen in Dominion forces before. Reverence mixed with terror. The entity spoke without moving what might have been its mouth, its words bypassing normal sound waves and appearing directly in the minds of everyone present. Even through his suit's psionic shielding, Marcus could feel the alien consciousness pressing against his thoughts. The test samples require final calibration, the entity communicated. Human neural patterns show unexpected resistance to our modifications. 10 seconds. One of the Vorthak scientists gestured toward the empathy virus sample. The psychological warfare applications are proceeding as planned, Ancient One. However, our battlefield observations suggest that human adaptability extends beyond genetic factors. Their tactical creativity appears to increase under stress rather than decrease. The umbral entity's attention turned toward the containment units, and Marcus felt a wave of alien awareness wash over the laboratory. For a terrifying moment, he thought the creature had detected his presence, but its focus remained on the bioweapon samples. 5 seconds. Marcus made a decision that would have horrified his training instructors. Instead of seeking cover or attempting to escape, he stepped out of concealment and activated his suit's emergency beacon. The signal would alert Terra Command to his location, but it would also draw every security force on the ship directly to the laboratory. 3 seconds. Actually, Marcus said in perfect galactic common, his translator rendering his words clearly for the assembled aliens. I think you might be underestimating human adaptability. The Vorthak scientists spun toward him in shock, their weapons rising instinctively. The umbral entity's attention focused on him like the weight of a collapsing star, its impossible geometry shifting as it attempted to process the appearance of a human operative in their most secure facility. 1 second. The explosives detonated simultaneously throughout the laboratory. Marcus had positioned them to create a directed explosion that would destroy the bioweapon samples while channeling the blast energy away from the room's occupants. He needed the Vorthak scientists alive for interrogation, and he was curious to see if an umbral entity could be killed by conventional weapons. The explosion tore through the containment units, vaporizing decades of research in a brilliant flash of energy. Emergency containment fields activated automatically, sealing the laboratory as toxic smoke filled the air. Alarms began shrieking throughout. The ship's damage control systems attempted to assess the scope of the destruction. Marcus rolled behind an overturned laboratory bench as plasma bolts scorched the air where he'd been standing. The Vorthak scientists had recovered from their initial shock and were laying down suppressing fire while calling for backup. His suit's shields absorbed most of the energy, but he could feel the power cells draining rapidly. The umbral entity hadn't moved during the explosion. It stood in the center of the laboratory, apparently unaffected by the destruction around it. Its attention remained fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made his enhanced human instincts scream warnings. Impossible, the entity communicated, its mental voice filled with something that might have been confusion. Human presence in this location exceeds probability calculations by 17 orders of magnitude. Marcus triggered his suit's combat protocols and prepared for the fight of his life. His weapons were designed for conventional enemies, not beings that existed partially outside normal spacetime. But humans had a long history of improvising solutions to impossible problems. Yeah, well, Marcus replied, priming a micro-explosive. Humans are really bad at following probability calculations. He threw the explosive directly at the umbral entity, not expecting it to cause damage, but hoping to test the creature's defensive capabilities. The device passed through the entity's form without making contact, exploding harmlessly against the laboratory's rear wall, so the umbral could selectively interact with physical matter. That was useful information, assuming he survived long enough to report it. The laboratory's main door burst open as Dominion security forces poured into the room. Marcus found himself caught between Vorthak soldiers, panicked scientists, and an increasingly agitated umbral entity. His suit's tactical computer began calculating escape routes, but every option ended with probability of survival. Negligible. That was when Marcus remembered something Professor Vexani had mentioned during xenobiology class. The umbral collective was believed to be an ancient species that had evolved beyond physical existence. They perceived reality in terms of probability and quantum mechanics rather than simple cause and effect. If that was true, then Marcus's greatest weapon against them wasn't his training or his equipment. It was his humanity. Computer, he said quietly, activate full-spectrum chaos protocol. His suit's systems began generating random electromagnetic frequencies, thermal signatures, and movement patterns. To conventional sensors, Marcus would appear to be in 12 different locations simultaneously, while emitting the energy signature of a small stellar phenomenon. It was a desperate measure designed to confuse targeting systems. but it might have an unexpected effect on being that perceived reality through quantum mechanics. The umbral entity's form began fluctuating wildly as it attempted to process Marcus's multiplied probability states. Its mental communications became fragmented and contradictory, as if it couldn't decide which version of Marcus was real. Error. Paradox. Human existence violates. Cannot compute. Marcus grinned inside his helmet. Humans might be inferior to most galactic species in terms of raw capability, but they had one advantage that no other race could match. They were magnificently, chaotically, impossibly unpredictable. The Vorthak soldiers were having similar problems. Their targeting systems couldn't lock onto a target that appeared to be everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Marcus used their confusion to move through the laboratory, collecting data samples and planting additional explosives on critical systems. His comm system crackled to life with an encrypted transmission from Terra Command. Whisper, this is Overwatch. We're reading massive energy spikes from your location. What's your status? Currently confusing an ancient cosmic entity with the power of human randomness, Marcus replied, ducking under a plasma bolt that seared the air above his head. Request immediate extraction before my probability chaos gives them all nervous breakdowns. Copy that, Whisper. Extraction team inbound. Try not to break reality while you're waiting. Marcus couldn't help but laugh as he prepared for the next phase of his escape. Tomorrow he would be sitting in galactic history class, listening to Professor Zenth lecture about the theoretical limits of species development. None of his alien classmates would know that their human companion had just proven those limits were meaningless when faced with pure, stubborn human impossibility. The galaxy might be vast and filled with advanced civilizations, but it still hadn't learned the most important lesson about humanity. They specialized in making the impossible look routine. The extraction team arrived with the subtlety of a nuclear explosion. Terra Command's newest assault frigate, the Indomitable, decloaked directly above the Plague Bearer and opened fire with every weapon in its arsenal. The Dominion destroyers scrambled to respond. But human military doctrine had evolved significantly since the war began. Where alien species favored measured, tactical engagements with clear objectives and minimal collateral damage, humans approached warfare like a natural disaster. The Indomitable's weapons weren't designed to disable enemy vessels. They were designed to completely overwhelm defensive systems through sheer, impossible volume of fire. Marcus felt the Plague Bearer shudder under the assault as he fought his way through corridors filled with panicking crew members. His suit's chaos protocol was still active, making him appear as multiple overlapping probability states to anyone trying to track his movement. Vorthak soldiers emptied their weapons at targets that weren't entirely there, while their officers shouted contradictory orders in 3 different languages. The umbral entity had followed him from the laboratory, its form becoming increasingly unstable as it attempted to process Marcus's paradoxical existence. Its mental communications had degraded into quantum static, fragments of thought that bypassed his psionic shielding and filled his mind with impossible concepts. Warning, reality breach. Human chaos factor exceeds universal constants. Error. Error. Marcus reached the ship's main cargo bay where massive blast doors separated him from the vacuum of space. According to his suit's navigation system, the Indomitable was positioned directly above his location, preparing to retrieve him through a combination of tractor beams and sheer audacity. The cargo bay was filled with Dominion military equipment destined for the assault on Proxima Centauri. Weapons, vehicles, and supply containers were secured in neat rows, representing months of preparation for the planned genocide. Marcus set his remaining explosives among the most dangerous items, ensuring that the Plague Bearer's destruction would eliminate more than just the bioweapon research. Whisper. This is Extraction Team Alpha. His comm system crackled. We're in position above your coordinates. Prepare for emergency retrieval in 30 seconds. Marcus looked around the cargo bay one final time, making sure his explosives were properly positioned. The umbral entity had materialized near the main entrance, its form flickering between dimensions as it struggled to maintain coherence. Several Vorthak officers were attempting to coordinate a response, but their advanced tactical training couldn't account for the chaos Marcus had introduced to their operational environment. Computer. Prepare for vacuum exposure, Marcus said, activating his suit's space survival protocols. and send final mission report to Terra Command. 20 seconds. The blast doors above his head began to cycle open, revealing the star-filled darkness of space beyond. The Indomitable's tractor beam reached down through the opening, bathing the cargo bay in brilliant blue light. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the ship as atmosphere began venting into space. 15 seconds. The Vorthak soldiers were forced to take cover as loose cargo began flying toward the opening. Their magnetic boots kept them anchored to the deck, but their weapons couldn't maintain accuracy in the hurricane of escaping atmosphere. Marcus activated his suit's magnetic grapples and prepared for extraction. 10 seconds. The umbral entity made one final attempt to intercept him, its form solidifying enough to block his path to the tractor beam. But Marcus had learned something important during their encounter. The ancient being's perceptions were based on quantum probability rather than simple physical presence. Marcus activated every random system in his suit simultaneously: emergency beacons, thermal flares, electromagnetic scramblers, and holographic decoys. To the umbral entity's quantum-based senses, he became a cascading probability explosion that violated every mathematical model the creature used to understand reality. 5 seconds. Does not compute. Human impossibility. Logic circuits failing. Reality matrix compromised. The entity's form began to collapse as its consciousness retreated to whatever dimension it normally inhabited. Marcus had discovered something that would revolutionize humanity's understanding of the umbral collective. They could be defeated not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through pure chaotic human unpredictability. 0. The tractor beam caught Marcus and yanked him through the cargo bay opening into space. Behind him, his explosives detonated in a carefully orchestrated sequence that tore the plague-bearer apart from the inside. The massive research vessel broke apart in a spectacular display of secondary explosions. Its bioweapon samples vaporized in the inferno. Marcus was pulled into the Indomitable's recovery bay, where medical teams waited to check him for contamination. As the bay doors sealed behind him, he watched through the observation windows as the Dominion destroyer escorts attempted to retreat. The human frigate's weapons followed them, ensuring that no survivors could report the details of the mission. "Welcome back, Whisper," Major Rodriguez said as Marcus removed his helmet. "Mission success?" Marcus handed her the data storage device containing everything he'd learned about Dominion bioweapon research and umbral enhancement protocols. "Bioweapons destroyed, research data recovered, and I think I just gave an ancient cosmic entity a nervous breakdown." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "How exactly does one give a cosmic entity a nervous breakdown?" "Apparently, beings that perceive reality through quantum mathematics don't handle human randomness very well," Marcus replied with a tired grin. Who knew that being chaotically unpredictable could be a military advantage? The flight back to Luna Base took 6 hours, giving Marcus time to write his mission report and catch up on the homework he'd missed. Professor Caney's physics assignment was particularly ironic: a theoretical analysis of quantum probability and its applications to faster-than-light communication. Marcus completed the assignment in 20 minutes, drawing on his recent experience with umbral technology to provide insights that would probably earn him suspicion if his professors knew too much about advanced physics. He carefully dumbed down his answers to maintain his cover as an average student. As the Indomitable docked at Luna Base, Marcus reflected on the strange double life he'd been living for the past 2 years. By day, he was just another human teenager struggling to keep up with his alien classmates at New Geneva Galactic Academy. By night, he was humanity's secret weapon against the most dangerous threats in the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on him that his greatest achievements would never be recognized publicly. No medals, no parades, no acknowledgement of his role in saving millions of lives. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the galaxy was a little bit safer, because one human refused to accept impossible odds. Marcus gathered his equipment and prepared to return to the academy. He had morning classes to attend, study groups to participate in, and the careful maintenance of his invisible student persona. His alien classmates would never suspect that their quiet human companion had just proven that sometimes the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy was the ability to be completely, magnificently unpredictable. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, and new opportunities to demonstrate why humans were the galaxy's most dangerous species. But tonight, Marcus Chen just wanted to finish his homework and get some sleep before his next exam. After all, being unstoppable on the battlefield was exhausting work, especially when you had to remain invisible in the halls of school. 3 months after the Plague Bearer incident, Marcus sat in advanced xenobiology class listening to Professor Vexani discuss recent developments in the Galactic War. The ethereal scholar's form glowed with excited amber patterns as she described the mysterious destruction of a major Dominion research vessel. The implications are fascinating, Professor Vexani explained to the mixed species class. Intelligence reports suggest that the Dominion's bioweapon program suffered a catastrophic setback. Even more intriguing, there are unconfirmed reports that an umbral collective entity was somehow neutralized during the engagement. Marcus kept his expression carefully neutral while taking notes. Around him, his alien classmates whispered among themselves, speculating about which galactic military force could have achieved such an impossible victory. The Zorathi students favored theories involving advanced energy weapons, while the Krillians suspected sophisticated computer warfare. None of them considered that a human teenager sitting 3 rows behind them had single-handedly destroyed one of the most dangerous weapons ever created. What's particularly interesting, the professor continued, is the tactical approach used in the assault. Rather than attempting to match Dominion firepower, the attackers seem to rely on chaos and unpredictability. It's a very human strategy, actually. A Vorthak exchange student in the front row raised his clawed hand. Professor, surely you're not suggesting that humans could have been responsible? Their military capabilities are impressive for a young species. But infiltrating a Plague-class research vessel would be impossible for any known force. Professor Vexani's form shifted to thoughtful purple. Perhaps not impossible, merely improbable. Human military doctrine has evolved dramatically since the war began. They've shown remarkable adaptability in converting apparent weaknesses into tactical advantages. Marcus smiled slightly and returned to his sketching. His notebook margins were filled with technical drawings, improved suit designs, new weapon configurations, and tactical scenarios for future missions. To any observer, they looked like the idle doodles of a bored student. His personal communicator vibrated with an encrypted message. Terra Command was requesting his presence for another briefing. Intelligence had detected Dominion activity near the Tau Ceti system, and preliminary scans suggested they were developing something even more dangerous than bioweapons. Marcus checked his class schedule. He had galactic history next, followed by advanced mathematics and cultural exchange period. If he left now, he could attend the briefing, deploy to whatever new crisis demanded his attention, save however many lives needed saving, and still return in time for tomorrow's xenobiology exam. The familiar routine had become second nature over the past 2 years. Marcus had perfected the delicate balance between his public identity as an unremarkable student and his classified role as humanity's most effective operative. His grades were carefully maintained at slightly above average, good enough to avoid academic probation, not good enough to attract unwanted attention. Mr. Chen, Professor Vexani's voice interrupted his planning. Perhaps you could share your thoughts on adaptive immune responses in high-stress environments. Marcus looked up from his notebook, suddenly aware that the entire class was staring at him. His alien classmates wore expressions ranging from curious to amused, clearly expecting the quiet human to struggle with such an advanced question. Well, Marcus said carefully, I think humans might be more adaptable than most species realize. We evolved on what the galaxy calls a death world, so our biology is designed to handle extreme stress and unexpected challenges. The Vorthak student turned to look at him with obvious skepticism. Adaptability has limits, human. No species can overcome fundamental physical and technological disadvantages through willpower alone. Marcus met the reptilian alien's gaze steadily. Maybe not. But humans have a tendency to find creative solutions when conventional approaches fail. Sometimes the impossible just takes a little longer. Professor Vexani's form glowed with pleased yellow. An excellent point, Mr. Chen. Recent battlefield reports do suggest that human forces have achieved several victories that should have been mathematically impossible. The class discussion continued. But Marcus's attention had already shifted to the mission ahead. His communicator was displaying updated intelligence reports about the Tau Ceti situation. The Dominion wasn't just developing new weapons. They were apparently attempting to reverse engineer Umbral collective technology. That was a problem on multiple levels. Marcus's encounter with the Umbral entity had provided Terra Command with crucial intelligence about their capabilities and weaknesses. If the Dominion managed to create synthetic versions of Umbral technology, they might be able to deploy weapons that existed partially outside normal space-time. The implications were terrifying. Traditional defensive measures would be useless against attacks that could bypass physical barriers entirely. Entire star systems could be conquered without firing a single conventional shot. Marcus began formulating preliminary mission parameters as Professor Vexani concluded her lecture. Infiltration would be even more challenging this time, given that the Dominion had undoubtedly improved their security procedures after the Plague-Bearer incident. They would be expecting human infiltrators now, which meant Marcus would need to develop entirely new tactics. As the class ended and students filed out, Marcus gathered his materials slowly. He needed to maintain his cover identity for a few more minutes before departing for Luna Command. His alien classmates chatted among themselves about upcoming exams and social events, their conversations a reminder of the normal life he'd given up to protect the galaxy. Sometimes Marcus wondered what it would be like to actually be the student he pretended to be. To worry about grades and relationships instead of galactic warfare. To see his classmates as friends rather than unknowing beneficiaries of his protection. To live a life where his greatest concern was passing Professor Kane's physics exam rather than preventing the extinction of sentient life. But those thoughts were a luxury he couldn't afford. The galaxy was still at war, and humanity's survival depended on maintaining advantages that their enemies didn't understand. Marcus Chen would continue to be invisible in the halls of school, and unstoppable on the battlefield for as long as the galaxy needed him. His communicator chimed again, this time with urgent priority coding. The situation at Tau Ceti was deteriorating rapidly, and Terra Command needed their best operative deployed immediately. Marcus shouldered his backpack and headed for the transport shuttle, already shifting from student mode to operative mode. His alien classmates would assume he'd gone home sick or left early for personal reasons. None of them would guess that their quiet human companion was about to embark on another mission to save the galaxy. After all, that was the point of being invisible. The most dangerous weapons were the ones nobody saw coming, and Marcus Chen had perfected the art of being humanity's secret guardian. The galaxy might never know his name, but it would continue to exist because one human teenager refused to let impossible odds stop him from doing what was right. The war was far from over, and Marcus Chen had work to do. The halls of school would have to wait. The battlefield was calling, and he had never learned how to say no to impossible missions. Some things, he reflected, were more important than maintaining perfect attendance.